Hello, my name is Arielle, and today I'll be talking to you about impacts of wild pigs on acorn availability as a food source for native wildlife. Many native wildlife species consume acorns as a necessary but ephemeral food source. Hard mass provides nutritional benefits that are a major source of fat stores that many species rely on for survival and successful reproduction, particularly through the winter months when other food is not as available for consumption. White-tailed deer are known to rely on acorns as a nutritional base of their diet, making up to 50% of their overall diet. Deer have been shown to spend 50% of their time during seasons of acorn availability, like fall and winter months, searching for acorns, even after the peak acorn fall. When acorns are more available, there is a positive correlation with fawn survival and birth weights. Like deer, squirrels rely heavily on acorns as a food source during times of acorn fall, but also caching this hard mass for use later in the year. By doing so, squirrels can be imperative to natural regeneration of many seed-producing trees through these acorns that they cache. Black bears also have a preference for acorns because they need these high amounts of fat during winter months, but they will rely on other food items when acorns are not as available. Like these other species, wild pigs consume acorns, but given their destructive food consumption habits, they may be doing so in a way that negatively impacts other native species. It has been shown that competition for resources, such as acorns, may propagate one species who may be more aggressive or dominant in competition, but taking away this resource for other mass-dependent species who may not be as dominant. Wild pigs, like many other species, consume acorns as they are energy-rich and prefer this food source when available. There have been studies conducted that explain the diet of wild pigs, showing that they are opportunistic eaters and their diet consists of many items ranging from hard mass, insects, snails, grasses, fruit, and other soft masses. Since acorns are only seasonally available, starting the fall through the early spring, species are allowed the opportunity to consume this vital food source only at certain times of the year. Because of this, when diet studies are conducted can influence the results. Previous literature has shown wild pigs target acorns as a food source when it's available, like many other species. However, little is known about the relationship between acorns being consumed by wild pigs and the lack thereof for other native wildlife species. Therefore, our objective was to estimate acorn consumption by wild pigs relative to that of other native wildlife. Our study area was in Macon County, Alabama, denoted by the yellow point on this map, about 40 miles southwest of Auburn, denoted by the green point. It was on about 3,500 hectares of privately owned property made of mixed forest, deciduous forest, evergreen forest, and woody wetlands. And now our area is primarily managed for wildlife, mainly northern bobwhite and white-tailed deer. At each of our sites, we had 40 camera traps. We placed all of these traps under acorn-producing trees in attempts to limit the bias of baiting. Each of our points were placed at least 150 meters apart in another attempt to eliminate the bias of independent sampling. At each of our sites, we had a 1x1 meter sand pad. We placed the center of this pad 2.5 meters from the camera, or from the base of the tree, and on each of our sand pads we had 5 acorns. Each of our sites was viewed by a game camera, and we equipped this to run 24/7 with 1-minute delays between images. We had 14-day periods, and we had 5 of the 14-day periods ranging from October into February. Now, this is the same site setup. You can still see the game camera and the sand pad. However, now you can see our 2 acorn traps. Our acorn traps are made of plastic buckets, and inside each of our buckets we had a plastic snow fence across the diameter, so we would be preventing animals from reaching in and grabbing and removing acorns. Each of our buckets were staked down with a 1.5 meter rebar stake, and we did this so the buckets wouldn't be tipped over, removed, or tampered with. At each of our sites, we had one of our acorn traps in camera view and one out, so we could observe if there was any animal activity. And from our images, we found little to no animals that were tampering with the buckets. Therefore, we think this may be a viable method for acorn collection. This project was part of a larger study looking at several different aspects of wild pig damage. Because of this, we had 2 years of data collection for this project. After year 1 of the study, we came in and removed wild pigs from our study area starting summer of 2019. We did this primarily with trapping and aerial gunning. Based on our camera surveys, we found that our pre-removal density was 9 pigs per square kilometer, which is relatively high but also comparable to areas nearby. With our efforts as of February 21st and at the end of this particular aspect of the study, we had removed 470 pigs from our study area. After each of the 14-day periods, we took our images and uploaded them to a laptop where they were stamped with a time and date. We did this in order to keep them in sequential order so we knew which acorns or which animals had preference for the acorns when they came to the site. When we were looking through these images, we were looking for acorn fate. We consider that to be either consumed or not consumed by an animal. When deciding this category, we consider consumed to be an acorn was pictured in an animal's mouth, or an animal was pictured within 5 images either before or after an acorn disappearance. Under the not consumed, we consider this to be flooded, covered by leaf litter, blown out of camera view, left at the 14-day period, undisturbed. Now I'd like to show you a little scenario of what we were looking at when we looked at these images. So here you can see the sand pad with our 5 acorns, and in come the pigs. Here they take a couple and a couple more. Now I'd like to point out that at the end of this 4-minute series, all the acorns were removed by just a couple piglets, not even full-grown adults. And you can also see all of the leaf litter disturbance in the background. Again, a very bad thing for the environment in several different aspects. Now for our study, we had to make a couple assumptions. We know the approximate density of pigs in our study area pre-removal, as I mentioned before. However, we don't know the density of the other species. So we must assume that each species has an equal probability of detecting acorns. We also had to assume that the sand pad did not influence an animal's ability to detect an acorn. We understand that a light-colored sand pad underneath an oak tree in the middle of the woods probably isn't typically what you would find, but it was most efficient for using our methods. Now, we have to look at each of these years independently since we can't directly compare year to year due to the drastic difference in acorn production between years 1 and 2. For those of you from the Southeast, you know that we had a very large master this year, which was kind of untypical, so that may have some influence on the results. So if we look at year 1, the pre-removal, we had about 3.5 million camera images, 55,500 total camera hours, and of the 1,200 acorns that were under surveillance in that year, we found that 367 were consumed by animals. Now if we look at year 2, the post-removal, we had about 3.8 million camera images, a little over 63,000 total camera hours, and of the 1,000 acorns that were under surveillance, we found that 334 were consumed by animals. Now, if we look at exactly what species that we observed consuming these acorns, on the y-axis, we can see the total percentage of acorns consumed by a species over the respective year, and on the x-axis, the species that consume them. In year 1, we found that of the 367 acorns that were consumed by animals, 13 different species were accounted for. In year 2, of the 334 acorns that were consumed, 12 species were accounted for. Now, all these species are important for their own ecological value. However, I would like to focus on these 3 because they're especially important game species, particularly in the Southeast. In year 1, pigs were responsible for almost a quarter of the total acorns consumed overall. The white-tailed deer are a close second. White-tailed deer are known for being acorn consumers, so this number does not surprise us. However, wild turkeys have a very low percentage of acorns consumed both in years 1 and 2. In year 1, we assume this is due to the harsh competition that pigs force onto turkeys. Turkeys wouldn't really stand a chance against wild pigs, so they may retreat to areas with a lesser density of pigs. Now in year 2, the small turkey consumption rate may be due to the competition with pigs during their nesting season, as pigs were not removed until the summer of 2019, and they may have still had an impact on the turkey recruitment and thus the turkey acorn consumption later that year and in our results. Although overall deer consumption rate went down in year 2 slightly, this may be due to the larger percentage that squirrels consumed in year 2 compared to year 1. We'll see later on that although the overall percentage for deer went down, their patterns for consumption actually increased over the year. One of the most significant decreases in consumption rate from year 1 to year 2 is wild pig, unsurprisingly. From the number 1 consumer in year 1 to one of the lowest in year 2, wild pig acorn consumption was greatly decreased, leaving these acorns available for the many other species to consume. Now, if we look at the 3 greatest consumers, overall in the years, these graphs show the total percentage consumed by each species in respect to the entire year. For example, in the first graph during November, deer consumed 16.1% of acorns of the entire year 1 study period within that month. We can clearly see the shift in the reduced wild pig acorn consumption from year 1 to year 2 denoted by the green bars. In fact, in November of year 2, we had 0 pig activity at all. Meanwhile, squirrels denoted by the red bars had an opposite effect with the reduction in wild pigs. Squirrels seemed to increase their monthly and overall acorn consumption. Deer, denoted by the blue bars in year 1, had a large peak in November, while in year 2, deer had a steady increase in acorn consumption over the year. Here we can see the total acorn fall on a monthly basis based on our acorn trap data. In these graphs, the y-axis shows the percentage of acorns that fell in each month in respect to the entire year. There's a slight shift in the timing of peak acorn fall, as year 2 showed a 1-month delay and when the greatest number of acorns were falling. However, year 2 had almost double the number of acorns that fell from our acorn trap data, as in year 1 we had 150 acorns in our buckets, and the same number of buckets in the same amount of time we had 238 in year 2. Now, if we overlay these past few graphs we've been looking at, we can see when the acorns were consumed by these top 3 species compared to when the acorns were falling. The yellow bars are still denoting the acorn fall, with the other colors denote the specific animals. Shown by the blue bars, deer acorn consumption clearly peaked at the same time of peak acorn fall. Deer focus on foods that are seasonally abundant, and when it gets to the point where it's no longer efficient and worth their time to search for these acorns, they move on to other food sources. While pigs can root even when the acorns are hidden underneath the leaf litter and in squirrel caches, so it's still efficient and worth their times when they spent rooting for acorns even after the peak acorn fall, so the green bars are relatively constant throughout the year. It's important for squirrels to have acorns for consumption year-round, so even when they're not falling, they're still looking for them. Because of this, squirrels continue to cache acorns throughout the study period for all year use. Now, switching on to year 2, there is a month difference in peak acorn fall, and these species seem to differ as well. I would also like to point out the difference in deer consumption patterns. In year 1, there was a clear peak that coincided with the peak acorn fall. However, in year 2, there is consistent increasing deer consumption throughout the later months after the wild pigs have been removed. This difference is especially clear in February, with a 7.19% consumption rate compared to year 1 when it was only 1.5%. That's a big difference. Year 1 deer acorn consumption halted near December, while pigs were in competition for acorns with deer. But in year 2, there was never really a halting point, rather it only increased. And again, you can see that the green pig consumption rates were extremely low if they existed at all in year 2 compared to year 1. As you can see, wild pigs consumed a significant amount of acorns, and they may be possibly reducing the availability of this pulse resource for other native wildlife species. Year 2 had a large decrease in wild pig acorn consumption rate, while species such as squirrel and deer had a large increase after wild pig removal. Year 2 had fewer pigs overall, but we noted greater consumption of acorns per pig on camera. And acorn consumption by wild pigs peaked after acorn fall, and this is mainly due to their ability to detect covered or buried acorns through their rooting techniques. Wild pig acorn consumption can be thought of in terms of use days for an easy and comprehensible comparison. How many resources, especially thinking nutritionally, are pigs taking away from native wildlife with their destructive feeding habits? Another aspect that may be caused to a larger issue is the impact that wild pigs may be having on natural oak regeneration, as they are consuming squirrel acorn caches and other acorns that would regenerate the hardwood density and have many other consequences to the ecosystem and wildlife management. I would like to thank the USDA APHIS National Feral Swine Damage Management Program for the funding, and also Auburn University School of Forestry and Wildlife Sciences, along with the Undergraduate Research Fellowship Program, and especially land manager Brooke Easley, as he was very flexible and accommodating to us being on his land, and also all these orange buckets scattered across everywhere. If you have any questions on this presentation, I know that I can't directly answer them right now, so I've included my email in the title slide of this PowerPoint. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions you may have, and thank you for listening.